The night was colder than usual for early spring. A soft drizzle tapped against the windows of Ethan Moore's small rented house on Willow Creek Lane, the kind of rhythm that lulled most people to sleep. But not Ethan. He hadn't slept properly in months. The house always felt too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the muted glow of his laptop screen, another spreadsheet open but unread. The clock read 2:47 a.m. When he finally closed the lid, the silence pressed in around him, thick and heavy. Then he heard it. A faint sound, soft, high-pitched, trembling, like a baby crying. Ethan froze. The sound came again, clearer this time, muffled but distinct. It was coming from below, from the basement. He told himself it wasn't possible. He lived alone. No neighbors shared his walls. The houses on either side were vacant, one under renovation, the other for sale. And yet... The cry continued, short and uneven, as though a tiny chest struggled for air. His body reacted before his mind caught up. He grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and stood, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the rain. The basement door loomed at the end of the narrow hallway, the single unlit part of the house he avoided whenever he could. He turned the knob. The old hinges gave a low moan. Cool air drifted up, smelling of damp earth and old wood. He shone the light down the stairs, the beam trembling with his hand. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "Is someone there?" No response. Only the steady drip of water. He descended one creaking step after another. The flashlight revealed boxes stacked against the wall, an unused washing machine, coils of extension cords. Nothing out of place. But the crying had stopped. The silence was worse. It pressed against his ears, made him doubt what he'd heard at all. Maybe it was the wind, or the pipes. Maybe his mind, worn thin by solitude, had finally turned on him. He swept the beam across the floor one last time. Then he saw it. Something small, pale, half buried under a tarp near the far corner. He froze, breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he stepped closer. The beam landed on a folded piece of cloth. A baby blanket. Worn, yellowed, and faintly stained. He lifted it with trembling fingers. The scent was faint but unmistakable. Smoke and something sweeter, older, almost human. Ethan staggered back, dropping the blanket as if it burned. He turned and ran up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind him. For a long moment, he just stood there, gasping in the dark kitchen. Then, from somewhere deep beneath the floor, the crying started again. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The crying had stopped again after he slammed the basement door, but its echo lingered in his head long after the house fell silent. When pale morning light finally broke through the blinds, he sat on the couch with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the basement door as if it might open on its own. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into something sharper, determination. He had to know what was down there. The house groaned as he descended the steps once more, flashlight steady this time. The air below felt colder than before, almost wet. The smell of mold mixed with something faintly metallic. Dust floated in the light beam like drifting ash. Nothing had changed since last night. The tarp lay crumpled in the corner, the baby blanket still where he'd dropped it. He crouched to examine it again. This time he noticed a faint brown pattern on one edge, almost like fingerprints. He swallowed hard and forced himself to look around. At the back of the basement, hidden behind old furniture, stood a small metal cabinet. Rust streaked down its sides. It was locked with a simple latch and an old padlock. Ethan tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. Something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, as if someone had wanted to keep whatever was inside from ever seeing light again. He fetched a screwdriver and hammer from his toolbox upstairs, heart pounding faster with every hit. The lock snapped, the echo loud in the confined space. Inside, he found a handful of items wrapped in yellowed paper. A small rattle with faded blue paint, a stuffed bear missing one eye, and a birth certificate half burned at the edges. The name was almost unreadable. Only Rebecca remained legible. Ethan's throat tightened. He stumbled back, pressing a hand to his forehead. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. He rushed upstairs, hands shaking as he grabbed his phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. His voice wavered as he described what he'd found. The blanket, the cry, the locked cabinet. The officer on the other end was calm but dismissive, suggesting maybe animals were nesting in his walls, or the sounds were stress-related auditory illusions. When he hung up, a hollow anger filled his chest. He wasn't crazy. He knew what he heard. He returned to the basement once more, clutching the flashlight tightly. The light caught on something else this time. Scratches along the lower part of the wall, faint but deliberate, as if small fingernails had clawed at the plaster. His stomach turned. He backed away slowly, breath trembling. Then, from somewhere deep in the shadows, a soft sound stirred again. This time not crying, but a whisper. A single word, fragile and thin. "Daddy." The flashlight flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Ethan stumbled up the stairs, slamming the door behind him so hard it shook the frame. He pressed his back against it, gasping, sweat cold on his skin. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, faint and far away. He stood there, staring at the peeling paint on the walls, trying to convince himself that what he'd heard wasn't real. But the baby blanket still lay on the counter where he'd dropped it. And on its edge, in the daylight, he could now clearly see a small embroidered letter. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the baby blanket folded neatly before him. The single embroidered R seemed to stare back like an accusation. He hadn't been able to shake the voice from last night, the soft, trembling whisper that called him Daddy. Every sound in the house now felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, even his own uneven breathing. By noon, he decided he couldn't stay inside another minute. There was only one person who might know the truth about that basement, the landlord, Mrs. Crane. Her house sat 2 doors down, an old white cottage with ivy creeping up the porch columns. When Ethan knocked, the door opened just enough for one wary blue eye to peer through. "Mr. Moore," she greeted softly, her voice polite but edged with unease. "Is something wrong with the plumbing again?" "No," he said, forcing a steady tone. "I just need to ask you about the basement." The door hesitated before opening wider. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Mrs. Crane gestured for him to sit, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly as she poured tea into chipped porcelain cups. Ethan didn't touch his. "I found something down there," he began. "A baby blanket. A birth certificate, partially burned. It had the name Rebecca on it. Do you know who that is?" The cup in Mrs. Crane's hand froze midair. Her gaze flickered toward the window, then back to him. "You must be mistaken," she said quickly. "No one by that name ever lived there." Ethan leaned forward. "Please don't lie to me. There's something wrong in that house. I heard—" He stopped himself, unsure how to explain the crying without sounding delusional. "I just need to know what happened in that basement." Her lips tightened. "That basement hasn't been opened in years," she whispered. "You shouldn't have gone down there." "Why not?" Mrs. Crane's composure cracked. She set the teacup down, her hands trembling so hard the porcelain clinked against the saucer. "Because it's not your business, Mr. Moore. The past is heavy in that house. Best to leave it where it lies." Her words chilled him. "So there is something," he pressed. "Who's Rebecca?" Mrs. Crane stood abruptly, her frail body shaking. "I've told you enough. Some things are better buried. Ethan rose too, frustration flaring. Buried? Like what's in the walls? The old woman's eyes filled with tears. Please, she whispered, don't make me say it. A long silence stretched between them. The ticking clock in her hallway felt deafening. Finally, she whispered, My daughter. She lived there once. A long time ago. But that was before you. Before everything went wrong. Ethan's chest tightened. Your daughter's name. Was it Rebecca? Mrs. Crane didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the window, staring out at the street. You seem like a decent man, she said after a moment. But curiosity can destroy you. If you value peace, don't ask questions you don't want answered. He left her house shaken, the unanswered truth gnawing at his thoughts. As he walked back toward his front door, the wind carried faint echoes through the neighborhood, like a woman's humming, soft and sorrowful. That night, as he lay awake, the sound drifted up again from the basement. Not crying this time, but footsteps, light, rhythmic, and unmistakably human. Ethan sat up, every muscle in his body rigid. Someone or something was moving beneath him. Sleep came in fragments that night, if at all. Every creak of the old floorboards made Ethan jolt upright, listening. The footsteps from below had been real, he was sure of it. Light, deliberate, measured. Too heavy to be a rat, too soft to be a person moving with purpose. It had sounded like pacing. By 3:02 a.m. the sound returned. He sat in bed holding his breath. The rhythm was steady. 2 steps, pause, 2 more. Each pause stretched into unbearable silence before starting again. The clock's red digits glowed on the nightstand, marking every second he couldn't move. Finally, he forced himself out of bed. Barefoot, he crept down the hallway, the flashlight beam trembling in his hand. The basement door waited at the end, closed but somehow expectant. He pressed his ear against it. The footsteps stopped. A whisper of breath came from the other side, faint and slow, as if someone were standing inches away, listening back. Ethan's throat tightened. He turned the lock with shaking fingers, then stopped. Something told him not to open it. Not yet. Instead, he backed away and turned on every light in the house. His pulse thudded painfully in his neck. If the police wouldn't believe him, he'd gather proof himself. The next morning, he bought a small, motion-activated camera from a hardware store downtown. The clerk joked about ghost hunting, but Ethan didn't laugh. By evening, the camera was mounted on the wall across from the basement door, its tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat. He sat up that night watching from the couch, the live feed open on his laptop. Hours passed. Midnight. 1, 2. Nothing. Then, at 3:11 a.m., movement. A flicker of motion near the doorframe. Ethan leaned closer. A dark shape drifted across the lens, vague, almost human, bending slightly as if holding something small. For a few seconds, the image wavered, distorted by static. Then the figure froze, turning toward the camera. The outline of a woman. Her head tilted to one side. Her arms cradled a bundle against her chest. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He adjusted the brightness, but the picture only worsened, her face pixelated, then vanished completely as the feed glitched into black. He jumped up, running to the hallway. The basement door stood exactly as before, closed, locked. No movement, no sound. He replayed the footage 3 more times, heart pounding harder with each viewing. It wasn't a trick of light. Someone, or something, had been there. By morning, he could no longer convince himself it was exhaustion or stress. The evidence was real, the figure tangible. He saved the video file to a USB drive and called the police again. This time, he asked for Detective Mia Torres, whose name he'd seen on the initial report about the house's ownership records. When she arrived that afternoon, she was young, composed, with a quiet skepticism in her eyes. Ethan showed her the footage. "I know how it looks," he said, "but I swear, there's no one else here." She studied the screen for a long time before answering. "I'll look into it," she finally said. "Do you know anyone named Rebecca?" Ethan froze. "Why?" Mia hesitated. "Because that name, it's in our old records tied to this property." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Who was she?" The detective closed her notebook slowly. "Your landlord's daughter," she said. "She went missing 2 years ago." Detective Mia Torres returned the next morning with a folder tucked beneath her arm and the kind of wary curiosity reserved for cases that defied logic. Ethan had barely slept. The woman's blurred image from the footage still burned in his mind, the way she had held that bundle, the shape of her arms bent protectively around it. Mia set her folder down on the kitchen table. "I did some digging," she said. "Your landlord's daughter, Rebecca Crane, went missing 2 years ago. She lived here, your exact address. Police ruled it a disappearance, possibly voluntary." Ethan frowned. "Voluntary? What about her child?" Mia hesitated. "That's the thing. Records show she gave birth shortly before she vanished. The baby was never officially registered. The father's name was left blank." Ethan felt a slow, cold wave spread through his chest. "And no one thought that was strange?" "They did," Mia said quietly. "But Mrs. Crane insisted her daughter left town after an argument. There was no evidence of foul play, no body, no crime scene." She paused, watching him carefully. "Until now." Ethan rubbed his temples, his voice shaking. "The cabinet, the blanket, the crying, it's all connected. She's still here, isn't she?" Mia didn't answer immediately. She opened her folder, revealing photographs of Rebecca. One showed a smiling young woman in her 20s, hair dark and tangled, eyes tired but kind. "She suffered from postpartum depression," Mia said softly. "She was reported to have struggled." Ethan stared at the photo. Something about her expression, half sad, half defiant, felt familiar, though he couldn't place why. "May I keep this?" he asked. Mia shook her head. "Not yet, but I'll leave a copy." He nodded, lost in thought. If she really disappeared here, that means there's something in this house. Something everyone missed. "That's possible," Mia said. "But be careful. I can request a search warrant, though it'll take time. Until then, don't go tearing up the place." That night, Ethan ignored her warning. He couldn't stop himself. The moment the house grew quiet, he rewatched the footage again and again. Every glitch, every shadow shift, every faint blur behind the woman's figure. On the fourth viewing, he caught something new, barely visible in the corner of the frame. A reflection. In the old glass cabinet behind her, he saw the faintest trace of a second figure. A man standing a few feet away, motionless, watching. Ethan froze. He scrubbed through the footage frame by frame, but the image flickered and vanished in static. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The air in the house seemed to change. Thicker, heavier. A sudden knock at the window made him jump. When he looked, no one was there. He tried to calm himself, forcing slow breaths. Maybe it was just another glitch. Maybe the reflection was his own. But deep down, he didn't believe that. The shape behind her hadn't been holding a camera. It had been standing too still. He closed his laptop, heart racing. For the first time, he felt like the house wasn't just haunted. It was hiding something physical, buried deep beneath. As he turned off the lights and headed toward his bedroom, a faint lullaby drifted through the floorboards. A woman's voice, low and cracked, humming to soothe a crying child. Ethan froze halfway down the hall. The voice was coming from below the floor, near the basement wall. He swallowed hard, whispering into the dark, "Rebecca?" The humming stopped. Then, after a single heartbeat of silence, a hollow thud echoed from under the floorboards, like something knocking from inside the earth. Ethan didn't remember deciding to go back down. One moment he was standing frozen in the hallway, listening to the last echo of that hollow thud, and the next, he was descending the stairs again, flashlight gripped tight in his shaking hand. The air felt denser this time, colder, almost wet, as though the basement itself were breathing. The beam of light swept across the room, catching dust and fragments of old wood. He could still hear faint humming in his head, as if his mind refused to let the sound go. The memory of it, soft, broken, almost maternal, pushed him toward the far wall. That was where he'd heard it most clearly. He crouched near the spot where the foundation met the floorboards. The plaster looked newer there, a slightly different color from the rest, patched, sealed, deliberate. He pressed his palm to it, cold, too smooth. Ethan stood, grabbed a hammer from the shelf, and took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he whispered to no one. Then he swung. The first blow echoed through the small space like a gunshot. The second sent plaster dust raining down. By the third, the wall cracked open, revealing a narrow crawl space beyond. The air that poured out was thick and stale, heavy with rot. He gagged, pulling his shirt over his nose, but kept going. When his flashlight cut through the darkness of the small cavity, the beam landed on something that froze his blood. A crib. Old, wooden, its paint peeling. Around it were remnants of toys, small rattles, a stuffed bear missing its arm, and a plastic bottle discolored by time. Beneath them, wrapped carefully in a faded pink blanket, were tiny bones. Ethan staggered back, his heartbeat slamming in his chest. "No," his voice cracked. "No, no, no." He dropped to his knees, trembling, his vision blurred as tears stung his eyes. There was no denying what he was seeing. It wasn't just tragedy, it was deliberate. Someone had hidden in this. Someone had sealed this horror behind his walls. He reached toward the blanket, hesitating before his fingers brushed its edge. It was the same fabric as the one he'd found days ago. The embroidered pattern, tiny blue stars, matched perfectly. Ethan's flashlight flickered once, then again. The beam dimmed, forcing him to shake it. As he did, something in the far corner of the crawl space shifted. He froze, breath shallow. "Hello?" The faint sound of movement, like fabric brushing wood, answered him. Then silence. He crawled closer, ignoring the sting of plaster dust in his eyes. His flashlight caught on another object half buried under debris. A locket. He picked it up, wiping away the grime. Inside was a photograph of a young woman holding a newborn baby. Rebecca Crane. Ethan's chest tightened. "It's you," he whispered. The light flickered again. For an instant, he thought he saw a figure crouched at the edge of the crawl space. A woman's silhouette, her hair hanging loose, her face hidden in shadow. He blinked, and she was gone. The flashlight went out completely, plunging him into blackness. Panic surged. He scrambled backward, knocking into the wall, dust and fragments falling around him. He climbed out, gasping, gripping the hammer as though it could protect him from something unseen. Above him, faint footsteps crossed the floorboards of the kitchen. Slow, steady, deliberate. He called out, voice trembling. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the quiet sound of humming again. Faint, but closer this time, coming from directly above his head. By morning, Ethan's hands were still shaking. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that small crib, the faded pink blanket, the bones curled like a secret the house had been forced to keep. He sat in his car outside Mrs. Crane's cottage for nearly an hour before gathering the courage to knock. When she opened the door, the warmth of her little home, fresh bread, tea, sunlight spilling through lace curtains, felt wrong, like stepping into another world where nothing horrific could exist. But the look in her eyes told him she already knew why he'd come. "I told you to leave the past buried," she whispered. Ethan's voice trembled. "You knew, didn't you? You knew there was a baby down there." Her face collapsed into sorrow. "I hoped you'd never find it." "Whose child was it, Mrs. Crane?" She turned away, gripping the back of a chair for balance. "My granddaughter," she said finally. "Rebecca's little girl." The room felt smaller, air thickening with grief. "What happened?" Ethan asked softly. Mrs. Crane sat down, her frail hands twisting a handkerchief. "Rebecca wasn't well after the baby came. The doctors said it was depression, but I knew it was worse. She wouldn't sleep. She said the baby wouldn't stop crying even when it wasn't. She heard things that weren't there." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten until that night." Ethan listened, motionless. "She called me at midnight, sobbing. When I got there, she was sitting on the floor holding the baby. There was blood on the blanket. She kept saying, 'She wouldn't stop crying, Mama. She wouldn't stop.'" Mrs. Crane's eyes filled with tears that glistened in the sunlight. "I should have called the police, but I couldn't let them take her away. She was all I had." Ethan swallowed hard. "So you hid it, both of them?" Mrs. Crane nodded slowly. "I buried the child in that crawl space and sealed it myself. I told everyone Rebecca had gone to stay with relatives. A month later, she took her own life in that same house." The silence that followed was unbearable. "I thought if no one ever knew," she whispered, "maybe their souls could rest." Ethan's throat felt raw. "But they haven't, have they? I can hear her crying, Mrs. Crane. I can hear the baby." Her expression shifted from grief to terror. "Then it's starting again," she said, her voice barely a breath. "You shouldn't have touched the wall." "What do you mean?" "She doesn't rest when disturbed," Mrs. Crane whispered, clutching his arm. "That's why I left the cabinet locked, why I warned you. You've woken her, Mr. Moore. She knows you're there." Ethan pulled away, his heart pounding. "That's not possible." "Listen to me," she said fiercely, surprising him with sudden strength. "Leave that house, tonight. Don't stay another minute." He stepped back, shaken. "I can't just walk away from this." "Then you'll end up like her," Mrs. Crane whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "You'll hear the crying until it's inside you." Ethan turned and left, her words echoing in his mind. That night, the crying returned. Louder, closer. Ethan didn't remember driving home. His body moved through the motions while his mind replayed Mrs. Crane's trembling words. "You've woken her." They looped endlessly, a haunting refrain that refused to fade. By the time he reached the house, dusk had settled like ash over the town. The air felt heavier, colder. The lights inside flickered as he entered, the bulb in the hallway buzzing faintly, like static. He tried to tell himself it was exhaustion. His rational mind fought to restore order. It's grief, guilt, suggestion. Nothing more. But when the first sound came, all logic unraveled. A faint whimper, then a small, gasping cry. Ethan froze in the kitchen, heart pounding. It was the same sound that had started everything. But this time it wasn't coming from the basement. It was upstairs. He moved toward the staircase, every step deliberate, his breath shallow. The cry grew louder with each foot he climbed, raw, human, wet with distress. The hallway stretched longer than usual, shadows spilling across the wallpaper like ink. When he reached his bedroom door, the sound stopped. Just silence. Ethan flicked the light on. Nothing. The room was empty, still. He checked under the bed, in the closet. Nothing. But when he turned to leave, he noticed something that hadn't been there before, a small handprint on the mirror. Too small to be an adult's. He backed away slowly, his voice trembling. "Who's there?" Only his echo answered. He stumbled downstairs, grabbed his phone, and called Mrs. Crane. The line rang twice before her frail voice answered. "She's not just a ghost," Mrs. Crane whispered before he could speak. "She's a memory that repeats itself. You've stepped into the same grief that consumed my daughter." Ethan's pulse thundered. "What do I do?" There was a pause, and then, "You listen. Find where the crying leads. She's trying to show you something." Before he could ask more, the line went dead. The crying returned, this time faint but clear, drifting down from the attic. Ethan hesitated, staring at the narrow hatch above the hallway. It had always been locked. He'd never bothered to open it. Now a dull creak sounded as the latch unhooked on its own. He climbed the ladder slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. The attic smelled of dust and age, filled with forgotten boxes. The beam of light swept across cobwebs and old trunks until it caught something in the corner. A small wooden rocking chair. It moved on its own, just slightly. And lying beside it was a broken baby monitor. The speaker was cracked, but through the static came that unmistakable sound. A baby's cry, weak but constant, as if trapped inside the device. Ethan knelt, hands shaking, whispering, "Why are you still here?" The rocking chair stopped. The air grew impossibly still. Then, from behind him, a voice, soft, female, trembling, whispered, "Because you opened the door." Ethan turned sharply, but there was no one there. Only the monitor, still hissing, still crying. He stumbled down from the attic, clutching the device. He didn't notice the faint lullaby now echoing beneath the static. Ethan hadn't slept for 2 nights. The crying had stopped sometime before dawn, but the silence that replaced it felt worse, like the pause before a storm. He sat in the living room, the broken baby monitor on the table, its static still whispering faintly. When a knock came at the door, he nearly dropped his coffee. Standing outside was a woman he hadn't seen in years, Lena, his ex-girlfriend. She looked older, paler, her dark hair tied back, eyes lined with exhaustion. "I saw your messages," she said softly. "You sounded scared." Ethan hesitated, unsure how she'd even known to come. "I didn't message you," he said. Lena frowned. "Yes, you did. Last night. You said, 'I need to show you what I found in the basement.'" He froze. He hadn't sent anything. His phone was on the table the whole night. "Come in," he whispered. She stepped inside, glancing around the dim room. "It feels colder than I remember," she said, rubbing her arms. Ethan led her to the table and showed her the monitor. "That's what started it. I found it in the attic. It keeps playing." He trailed off as the static shifted, almost like breath between the noise. Lena leaned closer, listening. Then she paled. "Ethan, that sound, it's a recording. I've heard this before." He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" She swallowed, voice trembling. "When we lived together, before I left, I sometimes heard a baby crying through the walls. I thought I was losing my mind. You said it was just the pipes." Ethan's stomach turned. "You never told me it sounded like this." "I tried," she whispered, "but you didn't want to believe it. You said the house was just old." The monitor crackled louder. A faint voice began whispering beneath the crying, a woman's voice, broken and pleading. "Please stop. Please don't take her." Lena backed away, covering her mouth. "Oh my God. Ethan, that's not just a baby a nighter. It's a recording from that night." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "Mrs. Crane's daughter, Rebecca. She must have left it running," Lena said, trembling. "Maybe she was trying to call for help." They stared at the monitor, frozen as the crying faded into soft humming. A lullaby, off-key, trembling. Lena whispered, "We have to leave this house." But Ethan shook his head. "No. She's trying to tell us something. There's something missing. Something we still don't know." Lena grabbed his arm. "Ethan, listen to me. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to stay buried." Before he could respond, the monitor clicked sharply. Through the static, one word repeated. Faint, distorted, but unmistakable. A name. Ethan and Lena stared at each other as the voice whispered again, clearer this time. Emily. The name Emily wouldn't stop echoing in Ethan's mind. It clung to the walls, to his thoughts, to the static that seemed to fill every corner of the house. After Lena left that morning, terrified, refusing to stay another night, Ethan sat alone with the baby monitor. The voice was gone now, replaced by silence. But that silence felt deliberate, as if the house were holding its breath, waiting for him to act. He searched the attic again. Hours passed, dust clouding the air, until his flashlight beam caught the edge of something wedged behind an old trunk. A small metal tin, rusted shut. Inside were several cassette tapes, labeled in fading ink. Rebecca 1, Rebecca 2, and Emily. His fingers trembled as he carried them downstairs. The only cassette player he owned was an old stereo buried in the guest room closet. When he finally managed to power it on, the machine whirred softly, swallowing the first tape. A woman's voice filled the room. "Diary entry, October 17th. She's been crying all night again. I don't know what to do. Every time I close my eyes, I hear her. Even when she's sleeping, I still hear her." Rebecca's voice, fragile, exhausted. Ethan sat frozen, listening as the tape crackled. "Mother says it's just nerves, but it's not. Sometimes I see her standing at the foot of the crib. I know it sounds crazy, but I swear it's me. Another version of me, watching her, watching us." The tape clicked off suddenly, the machine wheezing. Ethan switched to the next one, Rebecca 2. This time the voice was frantic, breathless. "She won't stop crying. It's like she knows what's coming. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop." Then came a scream, raw, human, piercing. The kind that felt too real to be decades old. Ethan stopped the tape, his hands trembling. He couldn't breathe. But one tape remained. Emily. He hesitated before pressing play. Static filled the air for several seconds. Then, faintly, a sound. Soft breathing, followed by a woman humming. The same off-key lullaby he'd heard through the monitor. Then another voice, deeper, male, spoke over it. "You have to hide her, Rebecca. They'll take you away. No one can know." Ethan froze. That voice. It wasn't just any man. He recognized it. It was Mr. Crane, Mrs. Crane's late husband. The tape ended abruptly, cutting off mid-sentence. Ethan sat there, stunned. Everything he thought he knew had just shifted. The mother hadn't acted alone. The father had been part of it. The burial, the silence, the lie. The crying wasn't just grief. It was anger. He needed to confront Mrs. Crane one last time. As he stood, the cassette player clicked again, on its own. The tape rewound without him touching it. Then it began to play backward, the voice distorted into deep, guttural sounds. From the static, one sentence emerged, clear and cold. Find her, where he hid her. Ethan's skin went cold. He knew exactly what that meant. The one place he hadn't checked. The ground beneath the house. The storm hit just after midnight. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rolling over the hills like a warning. Ethan stood in the basement, shovel in hand, staring at the cracked concrete floor. The words from the tape still pulsed through his mind. Find her, where he hid her. He'd torn away the carpet hours ago. Now only cold cement remained, slick with moisture from the storm outside. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. He didn't hesitate. He began to dig. Each strike of the shovel echoed through the basement, a dull, hollow sound that seemed to shake the air. The smell of damp earth filled his lungs. Sweat mixed with rainwater dripping from the ceiling. His muscles burned, but he couldn't stop. Not now. After the third foot, he hit something hard. Not wood. Not rock. Metal. Ethan knelt, brushing the dirt away with trembling hands until the outline of a small iron box appeared. The padlock was rusted, brittle. He smashed it open with the shovel. Inside were photographs, old, faded Polaroids, showing a young woman, Rebecca, holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Her smile was weary but real. Beneath the photos were newspaper clippings. Local woman missing. Infant presumed taken. Another showed a blurred man's face. Richard Crane, the landlord, younger, smiling beside his wife. Then, at the bottom of the box, wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was a cassette tape labeled Final. Ethan carried it upstairs, heart pounding. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing through the windows as he slid the tape into the player. For a moment, only static. Then Rebecca's trembling voice. It wasn't me. It was him. He said she was crying too much. He said she needed to be quiet. When I screamed, he... Her voice broke off into sobs. Then a loud crash. A man's voice shouted in the background, deep and furious. Unmistakably Mr. Crane's. You'll ruin everything, Rebecca. Ka! You'll take us both down! Then came a child's wail, sharp and short-lived, followed by silence. Ethan's breath caught. He heard a door slam, footsteps dragging something heavy across the floor. Rebecca's voice returned, weak, fading. He said we'd bury her under the floor. He said no one would ever know. The tape hissed, then ended. Ethan sat motionless, tears burning his eyes. The truth was finally clear. Rebecca hadn't killed her baby. She'd tried to save her. It was Richard Crane who had done it, and Mrs. Crane had buried the evidence to protect him, blaming her daughter instead. The house had been built on that secret. A sudden sound broke through the storm. A faint cry, distant yet unmistakable. The baby's cry. It was coming from below again, from the hole he had dug. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and ran downstairs. The beam flickered across the open pit, but what he saw froze him in place. The dirt had shifted. The box he'd opened was gone. In its place lay a small pink blanket, perfectly folded, dry, untouched by mud or rain. The crying grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls, filling every corner until it became unbearable. Ethan dropped to his knees, shouting into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The crying stopped. Then from the shadows a voice whispered, calm, soft, almost kind. "You found her." The air grew still. The blanket trembled once, and then nothing. The light flickered out. When morning came, the basement was silent. The hole was empty. Ethan sat alone on the steps, the storm gone, the air unnaturally still. For the first time in days, he realized the crying had stopped. But upstairs, the baby monitor clicked on again. A faint, gentle cooing filled the house. Morning arrived gray and hollow, as if the storm had drained the color from the world. Ethan woke on the basement steps, his clothes stiff with dried mud, his mind fogged and aching. For a moment he thought it had all been a nightmare. The digging, the crying, the voice whispering, "You found her." But the hole was still there. The blanket, though, was gone. He stood slowly, the boards creaking beneath his feet. The air in the basement had changed, no longer heavy and suffocating, but still unnaturally cold. A strange quiet filled the space, the kind that doesn't comfort, but warns. He walked to the center of the floor where the hole yawned open. The earth looked untouched, freshly packed, as if someone had filled it in during the night. Someone, or something. Ethan whispered, "It's over, right?" But the silence gave no answer. He went upstairs, every step echoing too loudly in the empty house. The baby monitor still sat on the table. He stared at it for a long time, waiting for the static, the crying, anything. Nothing came. He made coffee, though his hands shook so violently, half of it spilled. The sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin, pale lines. For the first time in weeks, the house was still. But peace didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause. A breath held before something worse. The doorbell rang. Ethan flinched, nearly dropping the mug. He opened the door to find Mrs. Crane, her frail body wrapped in a dark shawl, eyes hollow. She looked older than he remembered, her voice soft as dust. "You dug, didn't you?" she said quietly. He couldn't lie. "Yes." She sighed, stepping inside. "Then it's finished." She wanted to be found. Ethan studied her. "You knew it was your husband. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Because I loved him. Because I was a coward. I told myself I was protecting Rebecca's memory, but really I was protecting his." She shook her head. "That was my sin." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan said, "The crying stopped." Mrs. Crane smiled faintly. "That means she's finally at rest." He wanted to believe her. He needed to. But something about her tone, calm, almost relieved, made him uneasy. When she left, the house seemed even quieter. Too quiet. Ethan went back to the basement one last time. The air smelled faintly of soil and something sweet, like lilies left to wilt. He stood over the filled-in pit, breathing slowly. "It's over," he said aloud, as if convincing himself. The light bulb above him flickered once. He looked up, then froze. On the ceiling, drawn in dust, were small handprints, dozens of them, tiny, pale, overlapping. He stumbled backward, flashlight trembling in his hand. The temperature dropped sharply, breath misting in the air. The silence deepened, thicker now, pressing on his ears. And then he realized what was missing. The monitor upstairs. It wasn't silent. It wasn't even on. It was gone. He ran up the steps, nearly tripping, heart hammering. The table was empty. Only the faint outline of dust where the monitor had once sat. From below, a soft sound echoed up through the floorboards. A lullaby. Faint, melodic, almost beautiful. Ethan crouched, pressing his ear to the wood. The tune was familiar, the same one Rebecca had hummed on the tape, but now it was slower, soothing. A mother's song meant to comfort, not haunt. He closed his eyes. Maybe it was over. Maybe peace had finally come. And yet, deep beneath the music, almost too soft to hear, came a single, fragile sound. A baby's breath. Alive. Ethan whispered into the still air. Emily. The lullaby stopped. Only silence remained. But in that silence, Ethan felt something stir. Not dread, not grief, but something he couldn't name. A heartbeat. And for the first time, the house T truly exhaled.